Thanks, Paramita. The next commentator is Karla Hoff from the bank's research department.
Let's see if I can do this.
Yes.
Okay, I too very much enjoyed learning about Jerry Mackey's work. I've worked a great deal from the econ perspective on coordination failures, and it's quite remarkable how blind the economics profession is to what is truly a central problem of coordination, namely coordinating on norms. It is absolutely incredible. I spent a year preparing a survey for the World Bank, and then a big book on coordination failures. I do not think the word norms appears in that work. So it just shows what a high wall existed between sociologists and economists, which, thanks to conferences like this, has, I think, come down very, very quickly. Itself kind of a norm change. So I too will start with praise, and then I will suggest a slightly different way to think about what is a central idea in Jerry's paper that also Paramonita picked up, namely what exactly is changing in the process of deliberation. And then I too will relate this to my own work. So I take as central ideas in Jerry's paper that changes in values are an essential part of change. And, again, I'm going to question that a little bit. I agree 99%. It's just that word values that I'm going to take issue with. And then I 1,000% agree with the next, namely that collective deliberation can help bring about a change that has very important consequences. And I love his definition, which resolves all these problems of the fact that not all of us reason like people steeped in Aristotle, that there's all kinds of things that can constitute deliberation because it's really just an exchange of public reasons. So the implication of those three ideas I take to be that communities can make culture, which is a really, really exciting idea because it means that we don't have to think about people being locked in by history, that we can get together and actually change culture. And Jerry was saying how, foot binding, changed in maybe a generation, and in Senegal, the practice of genital cutting changed in maybe a few years. To me, that seems unbelievably rapid. When in my field we talk about the colonial origins of underdevelopment, and we talk about how the strategy that the colonial powers used in different parts of the world in 1500 and 1600 have implications for poverty and incomes today. So to me, it's really very rapid, and the idea that you can change culture is very, very exciting development idea. Participatory, so his example, of course, was the stigma. Well, one example in the paper, I guess he didn't much talk about it in his presentation, was that the stigma of participation of women in commercial activity can be changed simply through participatory discussion. You don't even need collective action for that. Simply the sharing of reasons and the recognition that there really aren't good reasons. That I don't let, my wife, why, man, I wouldn't let my wife go out because then people would think badly of me, and everybody else is like that, and we can confront our reciprocal expectations and mutually recognize that they're a constraint on all of us. Deliberation, in turn, can pave the way to coordination that can change the consequences of actions. So unlike stigma, which can potentially be removed just by sharing of ideas, obviously something which involves things like marriage require coordination, and Jerry did a beautiful job in his discussion, so I won't need to say anything more. So my first comment is that this paper speaks about values deliberation, And as an economist, one tends to think of values as being relatively fixed, very slow to change. And so if I take that as my view of values, then I think it would be useful to emphasize that it's not necessarily values that are changed. Instead, and just like the world is full of multiple ideas, each one of us is full of multiple ideas, and some of them conflicting. And Jerry Mackey's paper also shares this characteristic. So while sometimes he talks about how you're changing values, perhaps you can correct me, but my impression is that sometimes Jerry talks about changing preferences, changing values, but at other times he's saying, no, what deliberation does is it activates latent values. It examines them, it elaborates them. So let's say we all love our wives, we all love our children. That's our value. How do we achieve happiness for our children or for our wives? Well, we don't want them to be stigmatized. We don't want them to be denied a marriage partner. So it's not our value that leads to genital cutting. It's simply a strategy that we adopt because of our understanding of what other people think. And obviously that can be changed quickly. I mean, the Berlin Wall fell, all the countries that were communist became non-communist. Change can be incredibly rapid if change is not based on values, but if change is based on expectations. We all know that the second, Obama loses the House, now he's disrespected all over the world. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy. Before, 2 years ago, people thought he walked on water, and now he doesn't seem to even walk on solid ground. So I think, Jerry Mackey's work really underlines the potential for rapid change and gives us a new perspective on social change. But I think to really highlight that, the word values should be downplayed, and the idea of changing expectations and activating latent values should be emphasized. And for that, I'd like to bring in a paper from 1986 that Ann Swidler wrote that I read just a couple months ago, but I mean, it was really a stunning paper for me. It was a definition of culture. It was a definition which said, well, the old view, Max Weber's view that culture is really values, isn't working, isn't useful. So Anne proposes a definition of culture as a toolkit of worldviews and repertoires of behavior, selection from which depend on situational cues. So, there's a worldview in which I should engage in genital cutting, or I should prevent my wife from going to the market. But then there's another worldview, and there's multiple repertoires of behavior, and you can change that toolkit by deliberation. I think that's really the main point of what Jerry is doing. How to change the toolkit. And I think that's a very useful view, and I think if you marry what you do with Anne's language, I think you'll have something that's very, very easy to swallow and very, very attractive to people from different perspectives. So deliberation can make culture because it can make tools. The change in meanings and possible repertoires of behavior then in turn permits new forms of collective action. Once we understand that if you don't cut the genitalia of a woman, that doesn't mean she's a loose woman. Once you understand that that's a possible view in the world, then it's possible to come together and talk about not engaging in this practice. Whereas as long as there's a view that other people all think that a certain characteristic has a certain meaning, then you can't get to collective action. I can't get to collective action about, bombing the White House because it's my view that probably wouldn't be a constructive or viable thing to do. So participatory deliberation can change how individuals view their best strategies to accomplish their given aims. And sometimes that entails collective action and makes possible collective action. Sometimes it doesn't even require it. So it's really a very exciting set of ideas.